The radical fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday. Ladies have weekend. Ready for AMA and a contributor panel. I don't know, I have seven people RSVP'd to participate, and Adam's the only one who showed up. So I'm not sure what's going on. Adam, you're gonna have I hope you have a lot of questions, because we've got we'll see if they show up late, but so far this is it. All right, as you know, you can ask anything, so please feel free to use the super chat. Oh, so Ian RSVP'd, and he was supposed to yeah, so he says he has no questions, that's why he didn't show up. I guess other people didn't have questions either. We're running out of questions. I've answered everything about everything in the known universe, I guess. So everybody's just run out of stuff to ask me. Catherine, thank you for getting us started on the super chat. Anyway, you can, of course, anybody listening live can get in on the asking questions. You can use the super chat to do so. And you can ask, as I said, pretty much about anything. And all right, let's start with Adam, and you guys have an opportunity there to. Ian's also babysitting. All right, so he's babysitting something. I don't think it's a baby that he's babysitting, but he's babysitting something. All right, Adam. Adam always has creative questions for me, so go for it.
Okay, the first one is in response to Twitter's announcement, and of course Elon Musk, whom I greatly respect as an innovator, has taken control of Twitter, but his most recent change is that channels controlled by foreign governments will no longer be identified as such. And I sent you an email with a lecture on the use of hybrid warfare, including influencing foreign electorates, which is what the Russian government is doing on an unprecedented scale. And essentially, my first question is, if you owned Twitter, how much identification of channels would you put on, and what channels would you deny access?
In terms of identification, I would definitely try to identify government channels. I think that's important to do, not just for foreign entities, but also for other entities. I mean, you've got a challenge of you'd have to identify things like the BBC, NPR as somewhat government channels as well, because clearly they get funding from the government. And I wouldn't want to be in a position where I differentiated between which one is propaganda and which one is, in some sense, just funded by the government, but otherwise functions normally. So I would definitely want to flag any entity that I thought was being funded by government, or at least getting some of its funding from government. I also think that this whole issue of propaganda as warfare, I mean, this is not new. This has, of course, been going on forever, but certainly been going on since we've had radio and being able to transmit into enemy territory. Although before that, there were propagandists who would go and distribute flyers on behalf of the other side and during different wars. So propaganda has always been a tool of warfare. Nothing's new here, except the scale and the ability to infiltrate other countries' networks so easily. I don't think you can ban propaganda. I don't think you can stop it. Remember, the U.S. used to broadcast radio into the Soviet Union through, what was it, Radio Free America or something like that. And so
Radio Free Europe and Voice of America, and the Russians were jamming it. Yep. And I always had to tune very precisely because they used to drift their frequencies to escape Russian jamming, and the Russians would try to follow. And if I was quicker than the Russian jammer, I could actually listen to American jazz.
That's cool. That's cool. So I don't think there should be any limits on propaganda. I think this whole Russian influence in the election, if all it was providing false information, that's on Americans. If voters need to educate themselves, it's part of the responsibility of voting. You need to be able to separate propaganda from reality. And so I don't think we should be stopping that. I think, again, that is a very dangerous place where the government starts deciding what information is okay and what information is not. Let them, if we're confident in our own values, confident in our own abilities, confident in our own system of government, why are we afraid of the Chinese coming in and telling some lies about America? We need to tell the truth, and we need to do more. We need to stand up for that. So I would not ban that. I would definitely identify channels that I knew were government channels as government channels. But my guess is that the Chinese and the Russians are so sophisticated that they can probably find ways to broadcast without Twitter knowing that it's a government channel. Facebook keeps blocking me from advertising political stuff because they don't really believe I live in Puerto Rico. They think I'm a Russian bot or something. I don't know. So they keep blocking me, and I keep having to prove I live in Puerto Rico. I think it's also because I travel so much, and I often log on Facebook from other countries, and they go, this guy can't be real. So every time I prove it, it lasts for like 6 months to a year, and then they block me again. So it's a very complicated process, but I just think we need to get over, recognize this propaganda internally. Fox and MSNBC are clearly propaganda channels to some extent of particular political parties. And we need, instead of that, to focus on educating people to figure out how to discover truth. I think Elon Musk is overall doing a pretty good job at Twitter. It's hard to tell. I think the blue check mark charging $8 makes sense, but I am a little worried the fact that when I bought my blue check mark, which I couldn't get before from the previous thing, so they wouldn't verify me. But here I bought it for $8 and nobody verified me. So anybody could have started a Yaron Brook Twitter feed and got verified by paying $8. Maybe my credit card was on my name. Maybe that's their verification. But they did very little, and it would be good for people who are at risk of being of their identity being used if Twitter did more verification of that identity. But I do have a blue check mark now, so I never used to have it. I bought it. All right, thank you, Adam. Andrew has joined us. So hey, Andrew.
You would be the worst Russian bot ever.
I'm a terrible Russian bot. I should do some Russian bot stuff and see what happens, right? Putin is the greatest. He's so cool. It lasts 3 seconds, but yeah, there's a Russian bot.
They obviously haven't heard a thing you've said about Russia.
No.
So let me ask you, why do you think that so many people are afraid of Donald Trump?
Why do I think so many people are
like, what do you think that says? Like,
I don't think enough people are afraid of Donald Trump. I think everybody should be afraid of Donald Trump. I think Donald
Well,
Trump,
the people who fear him, you know, on the Republican side or feel paralyzed by him in a sense, you know, that's kind of the sense that I get from some people. They don't know how to oppose him.
fear him in that sense. Yeah, I think it's two things, at least two things. But one is, look, he's captured the base of the Republican Party. He has them in his grasp. Everybody out there says, oh no, they don't like Donald Trump. But he's what there is, and he's better than Biden. But everybody loves Donald Trump. I mean, these people adore him. They follow him. They'll do anything he says. They're completely personality, worship his personality. They worship him. You know, it was stunning. And I remember being stunned at the time when he said it. When he said he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't affect his campaign, I thought, this is nuts. Nobody can take this seriously. And he's right. He could have shot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and he still would have been elected in 2016. And he'd still be the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party right now. So I think one is that he, in whatever way there is a longing among certain Americans for a leader who just smashes stuff. They're angry, they're upset, they're unhappy with everything, with the way politics has been done forever. They're unhappy with America, they're unhappy with the direction, and they want somebody to lead them. And part of that leading is somebody with authoritarian tendencies. And part of that leading is to smash stuff. And he's it. And other Republicans are just afraid to alienate those people. They're just scared of them because I don't know. I think it's a half of the Republican Party is that way, or maybe it's 40%, but it is a significant portion, and you probably can't win the nomination if you completely alienate them. And it's interesting that DeSantis's strategy is to double up on those people. That is to double up on the issues that he thinks attract them to Donald Trump. That is the cultural issues and the go against the left at all costs kind of issues. And so he's doubling up on those to try to attract them to him. I actually think that strategy is going to backfire because it's not that. It's actually Trump's personality. It's actually his disregard for everything and his kind of nihilistic personality. That's actually what attracts them to him. And DeSantis taking on Trump's policies is a failure. I actually got contacted today by somebody who's meeting DeSantis next week, right? And he said, okay, Yaron, what are your beefs with DeSantis? What can I say to him, right? And I said, look, it's basically... Did
you start with how much time do you have?
Well, he wanted short, obviously, because he's... but, you know, he's going to have a long-term, he's going to have as much time as he wants with DeSantis because he's money. So DeSantis will give him time. And he basically said if I wrote something up, he would hand it to DeSantis. So basically let me see if I can find the text. But basically what I said was, you know, there are three things that I think you need to communicate to DeSantis. Where is this? I mean, one, that he's spending way too much time and energy on cultural war issues and sadly using the power of the state to address them, which I think is damaging. Actually, 4 issues. Second is, I see no free market liberty vision coming from him. And third is he's alienating people who he will need in order to win a general election, primarily women and independents. He's alienating them completely by, for example, signing a 6-week ban on abortion, which he didn't need to do. You know, there was already a 13 or 14-week ban in Florida. So he'd already established his anti-abortion credentials. He didn't need that, I don't think, to win the nomination. And added to that, what's really missing in American politics today, and this is true on the American side and on the Republican side, although I think Nikki Haley has a little bit of this, and Ramaswamy, the Indian businessman, has a little bit of this, and that is what's really missing is a positive, inspiring, Reagan-like vision for the country. And he basically wrote back and he said he agrees with all of that. But he said there's one more thing, which is implicit in what I wrote, but that he would add that he's going to go after DeSantis for. And that's his tyranny over corporations, which again was something Trump did. If you remember, calling up businessmen, telling them not to move their factories to Mexico and stuff. But DeSantis is doubling up on it. And so he's doubling up on everything that Trump is. And I think that's a losing strategy for him. I think what this field needs is a articulate, prominent Republican with name recognition, which unfortunately right now I think DeSantis is the only one. Maybe Youngkins in Virginia can do this, or Kemp from Georgia, who actually articulates a positive vision, kind of a shining city on the hill vision of America, which can get the base somehow distracted from Trump, and it can get independents and others voting for him. So what was your question? I can't remember the question. I've rambled on.
Well,
why are they afraid of Trump? So one is that the base is just enamored with him. The base just loves him. And the second is, the Trump, the Trump is brutal. I mean, he's brutal. He goes after you. He goes after you personally. He has no problem talking about how what your wife did, or how you look, or your wife looks, or what your father might have done or might not have done. He has zero problem, more than any other human being I know. He has zero problem lying. That is, to him, lying is just it doesn't matter. He's a pure sample of pragmatism, right? Whatever it takes to get to the end result, that's okay. The means absolutely justify, the end justifies the means.
Yeah.
So he's willing to lie. So if you go up against him and you have anything in your closet, or even if you don't, I don't know if you saw yesterday, I read some of the stuff that Trump is putting out about DeSantis. It's just ludicrous, but it's over the top in terms of how pathetic DeSantis is in running Florida. This is a guy who just won re-election by a massive margin. And it doesn't matter. Trump will lie. And he knows that if you lie over and over and over and over and over and over again, people forget what the truth is, and all they remember is the lie. And he has that down to an art. So people are afraid to piss him off. They're afraid of making him angry. And then the third.
What would you said?
Here's my third point. My third point is they don't have a positive strategy. That is, you have to have an alternative to Trump. You have to have something you can say, something you can stand up to him about, something you can put him down on. And you can descend to his level by attacking him personally, but that's not going to win you. He's probably better at it than anybody else. He was in New York. He knows how to do that. So you have to have something to distract from the negativity. And I don't think these candidates know how to do that or know what that content would be. That's why I said you need somebody with an absolutely positive perspective and somebody who has the attitude of, and really projects this attitude. Look, Trump is an idiot and Trump is a loser. Why anybody would vote for him, I understand why you would vote for him over Biden, but now you have a real option. And I'm not going to address every stupid thing he says because he's an idiot and he's a loser. He's lost. So we don't need this, but here's my positive vision. Here's the good stuff. And it doesn't that he ignores Trump, but he shows contempt for Trump while, showing some modicum of respect for the people other than Trump. And DeSantis, instead of doing that, is doubling up on Trump's agenda, which I think is a huge mistake. I mean, even if he can beat Trump in a primary, I'm not sure he can win in a general election because of what he's done. I mean, really, most of Americans want a president who obsesses about Disney. Really?
I hate that.
Disney's the place we all take our kids to. I mean, really?
It would serve him right if Disney, and I know they can't really do this, but if Disney had any ability to move out of that state.
Yeah, exactly. And look, and most Americans, even most Republicans, don't care that much about Disney's position on gays. So they have a pride parade in California. So don't go that day. But are you going to give up Mickey Mouse because you're upset because Disney did a pride parade? I mean, it is absolutely insane and stupid.
It's also so vile that, I mean, didn't he threaten to put some very
Prison next door.
unseemly thing around
Prison.
the
Prison.
prison? But
Yeah.
think of the ire towards such a positive American, stalwart corporation.
But they're woke. Once you're woke, you descend into the worst rung of hell, and then anything that's done to you is permissible. I mean, if somebody went in and shot up Disney, I'm sure some of these people would support it because Disney's woke, and therefore it's okay to beat them up and destroy them and do anything.
Yeah.
This is the mentality of so many people now that everything's fair game. Everything's fair game in the cultural battle.
Okay. So you would go after him both. Okay, so you're saying two
I would
prongs.
laugh at him. I would make fun of
Fight
him.
him.
I'd show him
Have
stupid.
to offer the positive vision. Both.
I mean, if I were DeSantis now, I'd say, really? I mean, Florida's this bad state. I mean, look at our record. Look at what we've done. I want to bring this to the whole America. I want to liberate the U.S. economy. I want to make the U.S. economy #1 in the Economic Freedom Index. I want to make this a robust, dynamic, exciting economy like America's always been. Donald Trump didn't achieve that in 4 years, and then he lost.
Yeah.
So, losers should be put to the side. Let's forget about them. Let's focus on winning and being successful in the future.
Can I offer one other
That would be the
thing?
message.
I think it does reveal something brittle about the psyche of a lot of Americans, that all he has to do is like give you a negative moniker.
Yeah.
And people all of a sudden are like, oh, I can't support that person because they're that's embarrassing. And it's like,
This
it's
is
so immature,
This is why I'm scared of Trump. No, I'm not scared of Trump. I'm scared of what Trump has shown us about the American people. And what Trump has shown us about the American people is that they are ready for an authoritarian. That it's just a matter of combining the right elements, but they're ready to just accept anything that some guy says. They'll jump on his bandwagon. They'll embrace him. They'll support him. Nothing matters, and they are willing to personality. This idea of personality worship. They jump on that bandwagon, and they're willing, in the name of hate, in this case, hate's of woke, hate of the left, to abandon all their previous expressed values and jump and support a guy no matter what. And that's scary. If I'm not suggesting a parallel between Trump and Hitler, but if you want to see that progression of how people become from liberty-loving, look at the Tea Party, liberty-loving, limited government, all that, to whatever he says is true. He could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and I'll still support him. Authoritarian attitude, epistemology, morale. You're seeing it. It's happening right in front of us. We're seeing it. And my fear is not now, but as this mentality gets worse, that there is a Hitler down the road for America, some kind of equivalent to that down the road who could jump in here. All right. Adam had his hand up, so I'll go to Adam and then we'll go to Ian.
I wouldn't even mention Hitler, but Trump, I think, is the American Putin.
He'd like to be. I think he'd definitely like to be. He'd like to be a Putin, Orban. He'd even like to be a Xi, right? I mean, he has expressed admiration for when Xi does stuff, everybody stands up when he walks into a room. When Xi does this, people cheer him. Why don't people like me like they like Xi? And he says this stuff with a straight face. He really holds this, but that is where we're heading, unfortunately. Yes, I do think he'd like to be maybe like an Orban who still pretends he's pro-democracy, but has control over the media. No media can oppose him, and he basically gets elected forever, for life, not because he cheats on the election, but because he's rigged the media and everything else to keep his message at the forefront, and he just can't lose. So.
And of course, that's where we come with DeSantis and Disney. Disney is the biggest media outlet in Florida, and DeSantis is trying to exert complete government control over it.
Yep. Yeah. Good for Disney for resisting.
Not an alternative to Trump.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. I was hoping he would be. He's turned out not to be at all. Right, Ian.
Hey, glad I could actually join. I
Yeah.
debugged the issue with my washing machine, so I'll see if that stays fixed. So I was thinking about a point that you raised a number of times about how businessmen don't want to harm their customers. And you've used, for example, the elevator example. Like, why do we need to inspect elevators, or why do we need to have governments inspect elevators? Because, you know, people who build elevators are not building them to kill people.
Yep.
You know, or people who build buildings are not building them so they'll collapse. And I've actually heard Dave Rubin use your argument when he was on Joe Rogan. I 99% chance that he got it from you.
I think yeah.
And Rogan came back hard at that claim. And I think one of the arguments I think you will eventually get in response is that what we're worried about isn't the true Scotsman, isn't a businessman. What we're worried about is the guy who is a crook from the beginning.
Yep.
Sets something up, you know, hey, it looks like the elevator's good, here's my money, bye-bye. And then the elevator collapses and he's got a different name, a different business.
Absolutely.
And Joe Rogan's point was, you know, his father was in the construction trade and they will cheat every chance they get.
Sure.
So I guess my thought is just that I think if this ever comes up, I think you need to be ready with the alternative, which is people like Rogan only see it as two-sided, which is government inspection or no inspection.
Yep.
Whereas private inspection is a way to do this. Like in the construction industry, if I buy a house, I want to see that it's been signed off by somebody, and then a builder will say, well, I got to get somebody to sign off on this, otherwise my tradesmen aren't going to, you know, I'm going to fail my inspection and stuff like that. And it's just an interesting argument, but, you know, we just really need to be clear that, okay, there are crooks because they will do crooked things.
I mean, absolutely. There's no question. I'm just laughing because somebody wrote, and this is typical, right? This is the mentality that Trump has built skyscrapers. Ayn Rand revered skyscrapers, and by implication, by logic, Ayn Rand would revere Trump. I want to yell when I hear stuff like that. It just drives me crazy.
It's a little concrete bound, a little concrete.
A little concrete bound, yes, and yes. So absolutely. Look, my argument is never that there would be no inspectors. My argument is that if there is reason why there should be inspectors, then there's a profit opportunity for entrepreneurs to inspect. Right? It's just like I don't believe that if you get rid of the FDA, drug companies, every drug company, every pretend drug company could just sell whatever they wanted with any label they wanted and just get out there. Maybe they could, but as consumers, we wouldn't buy it unless it had some seal of approval by somebody. And for example, I would argue that pharmacies wouldn't carry drugs that didn't have a seal of approval of some private lab that it checked these, and maybe 2 private labs, maybe 3 private labs, right? Who knows how the competitive environment will actually develop and how, and maybe the pharmacies themselves would develop the private labs themselves because they might be liable if they sell me a drug and it turns out that drug harms me. The law could develop in ways that would place liability on the pharmacy unless the pharmacy did something to make sure that their drugs were safe. The same with the building. Imagine if you build a condo building and now it is expected that when you buy a condo in a condo building, you want to see, one of the things you want to see is the inspection of the private inspection company that says that the condo building is safe. And now we as consumers have developed this habit of demanding that inspection. Or when you go and insure your condo, right? Most of us, when we buy a house or condo, we also with it purchase insurance. And indeed, if you get a mortgage, the mortgage company demands that you get insurance. Well, the insurance company would say, okay, I'm happy to insure you, but how do we know this building is safe? Should we send an inspector? Has an inspector been there before? Can we see the inspection documents that show the inspection? So my argument is that the market is a beautiful mechanism that would create all these ways in which to indeed confirm that products are good, that products are reliable, that products are, I remember I was a construction manager a long time ago. So I was in that business. And I was hired, my company, I was a junior person, but my company was hired basically by Intel to build its headquarters in Israel. And we basically built the first clean room in Israel. And we represented Intel, and the contractor got the contract, and the contractor built the building, and we would inspect what they were doing. And like the contractor would say, we put in a 5-inch wall, and we would go, no, it's 4.5 inches. I want you to knock this down and build it again, pour the concrete again, because it's supposed to be 5 inches. And I was representing the owner of the building, right? The owner, and certainly this was the first clean room in Israel. I don't know, clean rooms are rooms where they build chips, and they have to be unbelievably clean. Because any little speck can get on one of those microprocessors. So this is the first clean room in Israel. Nobody had ever built a clean room before. So there was a lot of this. No, this is not the spec. Tear it down, build it again. And that's your job. And for most contractors, there's always somebody on the other side doing that. And if a contractor will want to sell a building, if he wants, then he better have the elevator inspected by somebody. Probably an insurance company, probably an inspector hired by an insurance company. Most contractors, I think all contractors, buy insurance to cover the building under construction while it's being constructed, just in case there's an earthquake or something like that. That insurance company would send inspectors because they don't want to insure a building that's being poorly designed and built. So there are multiple ways in which you can do this. And again, I think this is true even of nuclear power plants. Built into the way we do things is a strong incentive by certain people involved in the project to make sure it's safe. Not everybody has the same incentives, but somebody has an incentive around safety. Insurance companies, banks, bondholders, mortgages, users, end users, all have an incentive that this is safe. Market mechanisms would come around to provide them with assurances for the safety of the product. Otherwise, no economic activity would actually happen. We'd get stuck.
An interesting example of that in the real world is Underwriters Laboratories. I don't know if you're aware of that, which came about in the 1890s due to risks of electrical fires, because electricity was completely unregulated and was killing people because it was unreliable and different standards. And so this is it's still a private company to this day. But a lot of electric goods in the U.S., if you buy it, it's got a stamp on it.
No, it regulates all electronic products. It's private, and the government there's no involvement, as far as I know, in regulating. And if you look at the number of people dying from electrocution over the last 100 years, it's an amazing graph because it's steep downwards. It was a lot of people dying from electrocution. I know, my parents' generation, people were dying of electrocution. Today, almost nobody dies of electrocution. So it's a constant improvement caused by an industry and a private regulator that are interested in continuous improvements and continuously making these things safer. So yes, I was going to say one other thing I want to say, and that is that when you think about the bad guy, the crook, right? The guy who's setting up the company, who's going to run away afterwards and all of that, and is going to build the elevator and run away. What I find interesting is that there's almost no doubt that crook is much more likely to get away bribing a government inspector than he is a private inspector, because the government inspector bears no liability. If the government inspector gets something wrong, so what? Nothing will happen to him. And a private inspector would lose his job, lose his business, lose his, whatever credit he had, he would be wiped out. A government inspector is not. It reminds me of, in California, I when I listen to NPR, they used to do these shows on food safety, and they used to go and interview farmers, and every time there'd be like an E. coli outbreak or something like that. And it was very clear from when you talk to from what the farmers were saying in these interviews, that they were far more worried about the inspectors coming to them from the grocery chains who were buying massive quantities from them than the inspectors coming from the FDA. They thought the inspectors from the private grocery chains were much tougher and much more rigorous and much scarier in a sense than the government inspectors. And it doesn't surprise me. One has something to lose if they get it wrong. They really lose business. They create liability. They really have a challenge. And the others don't have anything to lose. A government job that has they'll never be fired from. Certainly not because they got one issue wrong. So.
Yeah, I mean, the bribery issue really came out in Turkey, right, with the earthquake, where it seems to be clear that, you know, they had in a lot of places very stringent earthquake regulations, and the builders bribed their way around it.
Yes.
And a lot of people died.
Right. Cultures that have less respect for the law, less respect for the government, less respect for the rule of law you're going to see more bribing. You're going to see more of this. And cultures in America, you probably see a lot less bribing. There's still bribing going on. There's no question about that. But you're going to see a lot less bribing just because we just have a culture that has respect for the law and respect for government officials. So, you know, but absolutely, somebody will take care of this. And I trust that somebody, if they're private, 1,000 times more, because they're self-interested, because they have a dollars at stake. They have what does he call it? Something in the game. Anyway,
skin in the game.
Skin in the game.
That's Taleb's term. Yeah.
Taleb, and I agree with Taleb completely. You want to create contacts in which people have skin in the game. If they're decision makers, and you want to align incentives, and the best way to align incentives by having skin in the game. Thank you, Ian. Good question. Right, let's take a couple of $50 super chats. Thank you guys for being so generous. Clark writes, Trump garners these huge rallies like Hitler did. He's just a watered down version of a racial nationalist. Bad philosophy works at assembling massive numbers and unwavering followers to one man. How did Plato figure out how to get people to do this? You know, again, I don't like the parallels with Hitler. I think Hitler was a lot smarter and a lot more evil. That is, Hitler knew exactly what he wanted, he had evil goals, he had an agenda. Trump doesn't have an agenda. Trump is all about Trump, and his agenda is to win an election, but he doesn't have an agenda for America. He doesn't want to turn America into a particular kind of country. He doesn't care one iota. He wants to please people. He wants to be liked by the people that he wants to like him. It's so I think there's a huge difference, which makes Trump less dangerous than is somebody with that kind of characteristics who people rally around, who has a clear agenda, who knows exactly what they want, and it's an evil agenda. That is super dangerous, and that we don't yet have in America. So in that sense, I don't like the analysis. But how did Plato figure out how to get people to do this? Well, simply by convincing people, or by making what seem to be convincing philosophical arguments, that people don't have access to truth. They don't have access to reality. They don't have access to what is good and what is bad, what is right or what is wrong, what is good for them, that they can't even make decisions about what is good for them. And they need somebody to channel revelation to them, to channel the world of forms, to channel the truth to them, and to tell them what to do and how to behave and how to run. And America won't be great until we have somebody who channels the greatness of America and establishes it for them. And they can't do it themselves. They can make America great by their own behavior. So it's the real danger, and this is Plato and Kant. This is their big contribution to philosophy, and the big contribution to authoritarianism is once you separate the mind from reality, once you separate the individual human being from knowledge of reality, of truth and falsehood, of right and wrong, and once you separate right and wrong from reason, then you're setting yourself up for an authoritarian to come around and provide all the answers for them. And that's what Plato does. That's why Plato's popularity is so dangerous. All right, Hopper Campbell. I just watched the Leonard Peikoff video released by AOI. In it, Dr. Peikoff said, "We are more than halfway towards Hitler and Lenin." I think he's right. Until Rand's answers to Kant are more widely known, we will have to drift towards hell. When was this video released, and when was which one of these Leonard Peikoff talks did he say this in? So are we halfway towards Hitler and Lenin as of 1985 or as of 95, 2005?
Yaron, I just listened to it as well. It's 1998.
1998. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's right. And I don't know that we were halfway back then, and I don't know that we're halfway now. I don't know exactly how to measure these things, but we're clearly heading in that direction. We're clearly towards a direction of authoritarianism. And I don't think a Trump-like figure is the end result, because Trump is too disintegrated, too fragmented, too uncommitted to a particular ideology. I think it's where we go from here onward, and how long that takes, and exactly who arises and what it looks like. I don't know. But we're not heading in a good direction. We're heading in a bad direction, and left and right are both responsible for this. They're pushing us in that direction in various ways and to various degrees. And the scary thing, the real scary thing, is there's no opposition. There's just no opposition party to say, wait, hold on, this isn't America, or this isn't the right direction, or here's an alternative. There's basically authoritarians on both sides. Adam, quick comment?
Yes, there are exceptions. I've watched some foreign appearances of Kamala Harris, and if she speaks to an authoritarian, especially a dictator, she speaks the same way she spoke as a district attorney speaking to a criminal.
Well, that's
And
good.
I think that's a very positive sign.
That's good, although she has her own authoritarian tendencies that have to do with left authoritarianism. But yes, that's good. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen those video clips, but that is interesting. But the pattern seems to be that now the left is tougher on authoritarians overseas than the right is, whereas it used to be the other way around, that the right was much tougher on authoritarians overseas. Now it looks like the left, Biden is much tougher on Putin than most Republicans are today, which is really sad. All right, Jennifer asks, sometimes a person will plead guilty to a lesser charge because they're afraid of losing a trial. I don't think I could plead guilty to anything if I were totally innocent. I mean, I don't think I could either. On the other hand, if I thought, that there was corruption, or if I thought things were arrayed against me, or if I thought there was something going on where the only way for me to save my skin, or to get out of there, or to have a life, was to plead guilty, I would do it. I think, and this is true, particularly in as a criminal justice system gets more corrupt, right? I mean, if it's an honest criminal justice system, you never want to do that. But you could imagine a criminal justice system being corrupted to the point where you would have to do that. There's no other way to live. You just have to, find ways to survive. Right. Bradley says, your life is protected by individual rights. Is this the first principle to integrate for gaining the courage for independence? Not grasping this is what leads to irrational, animalistic fear and static seeing. Agreed? No, I don't really think so, because I think that places too much emphasis on politics, and I think it also places too much emphasis on other people for you to grasp, to have courage and independence. I think to have courage and independence, what you need to grasp first and foremost is the efficaciousness of your own mind and the fact that your life is worth living. So the two aspects have to be: one, life is worth living for me, and I have the tool to live that life. That is, I deserve life, I deserve happiness, and I can achieve life, and I can achieve happiness. That is what is required for you to avoid the irrational animalistic fear. Once you have those two, then you say, okay, and when I interact with other people, I expect them to respect my rights. And I want to form a government in order to make that happen. And in the absence of the government, I will defend my rights myself. But individual rights don't protect you per se. They only protect you if they're recognized, if the government is recognizing them. I mean, indeed, we live in a world right now where the government is often violating your individual rights. And yet that shouldn't affect your self-esteem. It shouldn't affect your rationality. It shouldn't affect your standing as a human being. Your standing as a human being, basically, your self-esteem is grounded in morality, and morality is grounded in epistemology. So the two foundational principles are reason and egoism. Reason and egoism is what make you not have fear and not be status seeking. Status seeking is a recognition of your dependence on other people. Fear is a recognition that you cannot know reality, that you're dependent on your emotions. And reason overcomes fear, egoism overcomes status seeking. And individual rights is just that way in which I want to live with other people. They have to recognize my rights and I will recognize their rights. That's the principle by which we will live together and trade and engage with one another.
Hey, Yaron.
Yeah.
I think it's implied by what you just said about reason, but I would put in terms of like one of the first principles that one needs to grasp, the primacy of existence. In order to,
I mean, of course, I find, yeah, I think it's implied in reason, and it's you know, it's too I don't know. I don't know what it's to. It's
very,
it's
but I
too
think
simple. Yeah, but it's implied in reason, and it's of course, facts are facts, reality is reality. It is what it is. So it should be implied in reason, even though, of course, if you have a Kantian view of reason, it's not. Gail says, how vulnerable, in your opinion, is Canada to invasion from any evil dictator for any purpose at all? Or is Canada's security entirely in the hands of the American stealth, if there is any left? Well, I mean, I would say two things. One is nobody's going to invade Canada. Really, I mean, who would invade Canada? It's too cold. Nobody wants to actually live in Canada. I mean, I know you guys think you do, but nobody actually, no, I'm kidding. But nobody's going to invade Canada because it's too difficult to invade Canada. I mean, it requires crossing an ocean. It requires dealing with very extreme weather. It's a very, very large country. I mean, what other country in the world could even think about occupying a country the size of Canada? That has basically a front on the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. It's just not doable. I mean, you know, theoretically, Russia's the closest, but Russia wouldn't have the capacity. They can't really run tanks into, you know, they have to cross Alaska. How would they get to the Canadian shore? It's just, from every practical perspective, Canada is one of the best, the only country that you should fear as a Canadian occupying them, and you might actually view this as a plus, not a negative, and that is the United States. The United States of America is indeed the only country in the world who could, and arguably should, occupy Canada, right? And I'm kidding about the should, but occupy Canada. But so nobody else could. But beyond that, yes, I think Canada, no question that Canada benefits from a implicit, if not explicit, guarantee of the United States. I think it should. I think it's vital for the United States to assure that a hostile nation does not invade either Canada or Mexico. I think, as I said, I think the United States should leave NATO and let the Europeans handle NATO, and the United States, Canada, Mexico should form a strategic alliance to protect North America. Maybe bring in ultimately countries from South America and create a NATO-like over the Americas, and I think ultimately you could imagine a world in which Korea, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, and maybe India created a kind of a NATO for Asia, which protected against the threat from Russia and China. So I think these regional alliances are the right approach to self-defense rather than alliances with countries far away that don't really pose a threat. There is, Russia is not a threat to the United States, and China is only because it can dramatically disrupt the shipping lanes to the U.S. It's not a threat to invade the United States. Nobody's going to invade America. All the movies about invading America are just, it's absurd and science fiction. If you understand anything about logistics and military logistics, nobody's invading the United States. Nobody's invading Canada. That's not the problem. The problem is, the biggest problem the United States has is the United States, and the biggest problem Canada has is Canada. And of course, we all have a problem with nukes, right? We all have a problem with nuclear bombs, and then we have a problem securing the shipping lanes. And I think one of the key responsibilities of the United States military, as long as we are a superpower and as long as we are what we are, is the protection of shipping lanes around the world. I think Ayn Rand viewed it that way. The main job of foreign policy is to secure trade. And I think that's what the U.S. Navy is for. And it's way undermanned and understaffed in order to actually fulfill that responsibility. All right, Adam. There you go.
Sorry about the delay. A question about the extent of loaning ammunition to Ukraine. Now, obviously, Ukraine can't pay for the ammunition they need right now. To what extent is it legitimate for the government to loan money and goods to a country that I think we have a strategic interest in supporting, because Russia has become dangerous to the shipping lanes and to the stability of our trade in many places that are way too close to Russia at this point.
Well, I think the rationality is
how far
broader.
can we go?
I think the rationality is broader. The rationale is, whether I like it or not, the United States is a member of NATO. And Russia's war in Ukraine is a clear, unmitigated threat to NATO. And as part of our responsibilities as a NATO member, I don't think you leave an alliance like NATO in the middle of a crisis. You leave from a position of strength. You strengthen NATO and then you leave. The United States, I think, should do what it can to support Ukraine in its effort to defeat Russia. And there are two ways in which this could be done. One is, you could say, look, we're just going to give them the weapons, because the reality is that we have a direct benefit. We are the direct beneficiaries of this. The more Ukraine fights, the longer it fights, and if it is able to beat the Russians, it basically eliminates a threat to the United States and a threat to NATO almost immediately. That is, it will set back any Russian attempts to disrupt NATO, to disrupt the shipping lanes, to disrupt communication. I don't know, there's a story out this weekend, which is not surprising at all. I've actually seen this early in the war. This was a story, and it's surfaced again. The Russian spy ships are very busy off the coast of the UK, primarily in Ireland, mapping out in great detail all the under sea and under ocean telecommunication cables, fiber optics, and of course gas and electricity. So they want to be able to disrupt not only internet access across the entire world, but they want to be able to disrupt energy access from mainland Europe into the UK, and electricity into the UK, and back into Europe. So Russia is a real threat. And to the extent that America gives ammunition and equipment to Ukraine, just gives it to them. That could certainly be part of a defense budget where the rationale is we're spending this on the Ukrainians so we don't have to spend it later on in a direct confrontation with Russia. I don't think that's outrageous. I mean, a commander-in-chief would have to make that case and would have to make it to the American people, and there should be a vote in Congress, and you should vote on that. And then second is a kind of a lease agreement, which is what we have today, which is we're making loans to them with the expectation that one day they will pay it back. I think that's completely legit, again, as long as America has a real interest in it. And if it never gets paid back, okay, but we still had an interest in Ukraine winning. But this is what we did with the UK in World War II. We didn't want to enter the war, but we also didn't want to see the Nazis win. And we had a strategic alliance with the UK, and we had a long-term relationship there. So we provided loans to the UK. I mean, one of the great travesties of World War II is we did the same thing with the Soviet Union. We provided, huge amounts of weapon systems to the Soviet Union during World War II to fight an enemy. But of course, by doing that, we perpetuated the evil empire that was the Soviet Union. So I think it's absolutely legitimate to do it, but you have to make the case, right? I mean, it would be incumbent on an American president to make the case to American people, to make the case to Congress. And I think, I don't know that Biden has made a case. I think he's afraid to make a case. I think most politicians are afraid to call Russia what they really are. So they kind of tiptoe around it. But yes, absolutely. The same reason why it was okay for, in 1973, for the United States to airlift massive amounts of weapons into Israel during the Yom Kippur War. I'm not sure it didn't turn out very good for Israel because it made Israel dependent on the US and therefore had to cut a ceasefire deal that the US demanded of it. But it was essential. It was essential for Israel to be able to defend itself and actually go on the offensive. And it was completely within the interest of the United States and made sense for the United States to do it. And my guess is that was also a lease kind of agreement that Israel ultimately paid for, but over time and at good, and I'm sure good interest rates.
To follow this up, as I read the Constitution, it's up to the Senate to ratify the Budapest Memorandum. If the Senate ratified the Budapest Memorandum, the president would be legally obliged to help Ukraine.
Yes, but the question is if that's the way you want to do it. I think on the other hand, Congress could just say, this is within the interest of the United States. We're allocating funds in order to pursue this national interest. They'd have to convince the president and Congress. And I guess in a completely rational world, maybe the Supreme Court would have to sign off on it. But certainly the Congress and the executive branch would both have to agree that this was a war was supporting, a country was supporting in a particular war. All right, Ian.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. So I know this probably isn't your favorite topic, but one thing I saw in the chat last week that annoyed me was this whole closed versus open objectivism. And to me, the willful ignorance of some people about what that even means. I think that we would agree that to us, closed objectivism just means that objectivism is the philosophy of Ayn Rand that she came up with, including ideas, even if she got them from other people, that she evaluated and put them in. For example, Ayn Rand didn't come up with the law of identity, right? That goes back to Aristotle and other people, but that could legitimately be called part of objectivism.
I mean, absolutely. It's a thing she identified as part of objectivism. Her writing, some affiliated writers, some of Leonard's writing, some of even Brandon's writing. I mean, the stuff that's in the Virtue of Selfishness, Capitalism, Not No Deal. There's an Alan Greenspan essay there. It doesn't mean everything Alan Greenspan ever writes is objectivism, God forbid. But that stuff is within the scope of objectivism. And that's all it means. And it doesn't mean she was right about everything. It doesn't mean it's closed to truth. It just means that that's the name of the thing that she came up with. She discovered, right? It's hers. She gets to name it. You don't get to shift it around. So, you know, that is, it's a simple issue. I mean, there's this debate going on. There's no debate here. It's either you accept her naming and her property right, or you don't. And either you respect her or you don't respect her. That's all there is. There's nothing else, because there's no philosophical issue here. The fundamental philosophical issue is, you know, the important philosophical point to make is the philosophy is not closed. Well, of course not. Nobody argues that. Nobody in his right mind says, no, Ayn Rand has discovered the truth, and no new truths will ever be discovered. And everything she ever wrote is true and will never be challenged. I mean, that would be absurd to say. So,
and they also conflate it with the idea of control of the evaluation of what is part of objectivism or not, which is up to each of us to decide. Okay, did Ayn Rand write this? You know, did she mean it to be part of the philosophy? It's not. There's no body, and ARI has never claimed to be the body that makes that decision, right? It's just weird and silly.
Ayn Rand Institute might have an opinion about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, for example, in Fact and Value, you know, when Kelly wrote what he wrote over tolerance, Leonard Peikoff says, this is not part of objectivism. This contradicts what Ayn Rand wrote. Kelly said, no, it doesn't contradict what Ayn Rand wrote. You get to decide. You know, the Ayn Rand Institute has a position on that disagreement. Right. But you don't have to agree with the Ayn Rand Institute. You can do whatever you want to do. Nobody's dictating to anybody, but the Ayn Rand Institute has to have a position about these things, because we are a philosophical organization responsible, you know, responsible for promoting Ayn Rand's ideas. So we have to know what Ayn Rand's ideas are, or have an opinion about that, and we might be wrong. So, you know, that is the that is important, and in that sense, if you get some big things wrong about Ayn Rand, about what is objectivism, then you shouldn't be affiliated with an organization trying to promote objectivism if you're wrong about some big issues. And therefore, it didn't make sense in 1989 or whatever it was, 1991, I can't remember, for David Kelly to stay connected to Ayn Rand Institute, because the Ayn Rand Institute, he got stuff significantly wrong about objectivism, and therefore couldn't be a spokesman for the Ayn Rand Institute anymore. He could still do his own thing. Nobody says the government should bar him from doing stuff. It's just that not the Ayn Rand Institute, because our interpretation of objectivism, our view of objectivism, is dramatically different. Go do your own thing. And again, over all these things, people make, you know, they build mountains over these things, and they create as if there's some I don't know, some big conspiracy theory behind all this. So yes, it's very frustrating. Not my favorite topic, but that's okay. It keeps rising up because they won't go away. And then my view is that ultimately the whole Craig Biddle and the Atlas Society will merge or something. You know, it kind of makes sense to be the anti-ARI. So there has to be an anti-ARI. So, but we'll see. Maybe it won't happen, but that would be where I think things are heading. So it'll stay around for a long time, and then, you know, they'll have a lot of,
and then there'll be another third organization.
Yeah, and I've said this in the past. If we're successful, there'll be dozens of them, and they won't agree, and it'll be up to individuals to decide what they believe and what they hold. There'll be all kinds of people interpreting Ayn Rand in all kinds of ways. It's just the nature of things. The more popular she becomes, the more misrepresentations there will be, the more people will read her and misinterpret her and get passionate about something, and there will more disagreements there will be. So for those of you thinking we're all going to be one big happy tent, and we're all going to, an objectivist world in the future is a world in which everybody agrees about everything, that would be bizarre and ridiculous. Even about, there'll be a group in 200 years, when the world is dominated by objectivism, there'll be deep disagreements about what Ayn Rand wrote and what's the meaning of this particular paragraph of Ayn Rand. And some people would be right and some people would be wrong. It's never that disagreement's going to go away. When it does, human thinking has gone away. The mind has gone away. So
yeah, that is a seductive position in a sense, though. Like every time I go to Ocon, or I was just at the Ayn Rand thing in Athens, you go in expecting, oh, you know, I'm going to like everybody I meet and agree with them. And no, that's not the case. I met plenty of people who are like, yeah, that's not the way I think about things, and I don't really want to talk to that person anymore.
Absolutely. And it's going to be like that when objectivism is far more dominant in the culture. In some ways, it'll be even more so, because there'll be more people exposed and therefore more opportunities for disagreement and distortion and interpretation.
Yeah.
Andrew.
I was struck by something Rand wrote in the Letters book, where she said that the relationship between Gail Waynand and Howard Roark is the strongest. The friendship is the strongest relationship in the book.
In the Fountainhead.
In the Fountainhead. And it's interesting because Gail placates the mob and Howard does the opposite. Where do you see, how did that nexus form? How did that bond form so strongly, given that they came at it from such opposite points?
I think it forms around whoops.
Yeah.
I missed that final
I guess choices were made oppositely.
But they're both in some sense seeking their own well-being, even though Waynand, of course, defines it wrongly, and ultimately it destroys him. And so all his actions actually not achieving his well-being, but he believes it is. So he's motivated by that. He's motivated by some sense of selfishness, even though he doesn't define selfishness. He's a man of immense ability and who drives to get his way in a way that I think Roark does as well, in that kind of bonds them. They have this immense confidence, and you could call it self-esteem, and they both have an immense purpose, even though one of them has a flawed purpose and a flawed self-esteem, right? They both have it and embrace it and are driven by it. They're not doing halfway stuff. They go all the way, and they become fully committed. Sadly, the relationship can be complete, because even though it's a strong relationship, because Waynand can live up to Roark, and he knows it. So he's the weak link, and Roark can, and it's the same with Dominique, right? But Dominique can rise up to Roark, and for Waynand, it's too late.
Too late.
For her, it's not, partially because of the way Ayn Rand views femininity, I think. But for her, it's not too late. She can still rise up and reach Roark's level. So, yeah, I mean, it's complicated. And Rand has a very distinct view of psychology and a very distinct view of what appeals. And Rand was so non-dogmatic about objectivism, right? And so non-dogmatic about human relationships. It wasn't like, so many objectivists I know who, if you think of yourself as a Howard Roark, that's a problem to begin with. But if you think of yourself as a Howard Roark, you're immediately looking for Dagny, right? You're looking immediately for Dagny, and Howard Roark loves Dominique, and I don't think 99% of objectivists could handle Dominique. I don't think they would know what to do with Dominique. What would they? And then they would poo-poo Waynand. They would completely, well, he's sold out. He's second-handed. How can I have anything to do with the man who's second-handed? And there's this attitude towards, I don't know, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, even Elon Musk. It's like, well, he's not perfect, so I can't even admire him from afar, never be best friends with him. And if you think about Ayn Rand and you think about the characters and how flawed they are, and how much respect she has for a flawed character like Gail Waynand and a Dominique or Reagan at the beginning of the novel, and how much she loves these characters and how much admiration she has for them. And then if you try to bring that into your own life and you look at people and you're completely negating them because you discover some flaw in them, or because they said something that sounds a little woke to you, then you're not getting it. You're not getting it in a first-handed way, and you're not getting what it's about to live this and what it means to be a valuer, which is the essence. It's not about following the prescription of a philosophy. It's about being a valuer. It's about loving life and loving values, and to see somebody who is a valuer, who might not agree with you on a lot of things, but who is a valuer, is creating and building and making and changing the world, and to disdain that person, as so many objectivists disdain CEOs who they disagree with in politics. Something very wrong. Something very wrong, and I think Ayn Rand would reject that.
It reminds me of in the Voices book. I forgot the exact title. But there's a person who got interviewed who was like her editor or something like that, and said they talked about politics, and this person was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal.
Yeah.
And Rand said, "I don't really care about your politics as long as you're going to represent the book the way that I want the book represented."
Exactly. And think about how many people in my chat would like, a leftist? I can't deal with a leftist. I can't even talk to a leftist. I mean, mow them down. Now, though, granted, leftists are worse today than they were back then, but, it's not everybody. It's not everybody. So.
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a while. I think it takes a few generations of this philosophy for people to get it right, and to get it right psychologically in terms of applying them to their lives and to their value systems, not just intellectually. It takes practice. All right, let's do some super chats. We're still about $400 short of our super chat goal. So, and we have no $20 questions right now. So if you're going to ask a question, from now on, make it a $20 question. And yeah, I encourage $20 questions. That would be good. That would be a good number. All right, let's start with Michael. 100 years from now, God, how does America look? Michael, you ask these impossible questions. What am I supposed to do with this? How economically free are you? And what is our attitude towards altruism? And how many Alex Epsteins do we have? At least 30? I think by then we've already cloned Alex, right? Because we have the technology. So we literally have 30 Alex Epsteins. It's not just people like Alex that we have. I don't know. I have no idea. So many things can happen in the next 100 years. I mean, so many things 10 years ago, I didn't predict would happen in the next 10 years. I certainly couldn't predict 100 years from now. I mean, I hope, and I have some reason to think that objectivism will be one of the dominant philosophies in the world, maybe the dominant secular philosophy in the world. People will be debating it and articulating it openly. I don't think there will be a need in that sense for 30 Alex Epsteins. There will have been more than 30 people doing what Alex Epstein has done to get us to where we are 100 years from now. We will be moving towards economic freedom and economic liberty. We will have more freedom than we have today, I think, 100 years from now. And this will be, these philosophical issues will be top of mind among our intellectuals and be debated and discussed and argued about. And yeah, I mean, that's the best I can do. And what is that worth? Almost nothing, because who knows what will happen between now and 100 years. And given that I'm not going to be around, I'm much more interested in what happens in the next 30 years, because I'm going to be around during these 30 years. And I think the next 30 years are going to be rough for everybody. And it is this, this is a whole show to do on this, but there's this interesting confluence, and you guys can think about what this means, but there's this fascinating confluence of the next 30 years are going to involve some of the most dramatic technological changes in all of human history, some of the most powerful technological tools we have ever seen in all of human history, both in bio and in tech, and yet a real deterioration in respect for liberty, freedom, individualism, and reason. And how that's never happened in all of human history, that confluence, and how that resolved. You can imagine that leading to human beings wiping themselves out, wiping humanity out, or you could believe that that is going to lead to technology allowing us to grow and be successful and become rich beyond our any belief, and that, you know, in some way will ultimately accelerate a philosophical revolution. Who knows? But I do think this is what's going to happen over the next 20, 30 years is really, really unique in human history. We've never had this. And it's not just about having nukes that you can blow up the whole world. It's having tools that reduce the need for human labor dramatically. But then do we have the freedom to create new jobs? And what kind of social upheaval does that create? It does involve having the technology to cure maybe most diseases and to allow people to live very, very long lives. But if we have to pay them Social Security and we treat them as little children throughout their lives, are people going to want that? What does that result in? How does society adapt to that? Do people have children anymore? There's so much interesting that's going to happen in the next few decades. I'm fascinated by it, and this is why I like to watch technology, because I think that's where the disruption is happening. It's happening on the technology front. That's going to completely disrupt human life in ways that I don't know how we handle. All right, a friend Harper says, forgot this AMA was today, so I have a silly question. How many clones of you would it take to fight a full-grown lion and win? No weapons. No weapons? Full-grown lion. I don't know. I mean, 10? 15? I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, is this me ripped, or is this me kind of lazy? Is this, is this me in the condition I am today at 62? 15 maybe? Pretty good shape. But lion, God, I mean, how would you even approach it? How would you even approach fighting a lion with your hands? Anyway, bizarre question, friend Harper. Thanks for the entertainment. All right, Harper Campbell, is the reason objectivism isn't resonating with people because most people today are anti-intellectual savages? God, you guys are negative, and particularly in the context of what I just said. No, it's not that they're anti-intellectual savages. There are lots of people out there who are super smart and produce and create and build and make and know more stuff than any of us do about particular intellectual views. But they are embedded with altruism, and they're embedded with mysticism. And so I think that the reason it doesn't resonate is because of how prevalent and how entrenched ideas about altruism and mysticism are. And they're not so entrenched that they're causing a complete collapse of civilization, because altruism and mysticism don't lead to technology. But they're there, and people are compartmentalized, and we have not been able to overcome the altruism and the mysticism that dominates a certain aspect of human life, a part of human life. But stop thinking about everybody you don't agree with as an anti-intellectual savage. It's not going to help your life. It's not going to lead to, I don't think, happiness and success and prosperity. There are lots of people who you're going to find you cannot convince of objectivism, who are super basically decent, good people who you can have a relationship with and should. Maybe even vote for. Liam says, we only resonate with people who haven't suppressed their feelings. I know lots of people who suppress their feelings, and they have other people who resonate with them. I don't know that I can tell you. I don't know that I can tell you that is a principle of who resonates with you. I just don't think that doesn't strike me as right. All right, Ian dropped off. Thanks, Ian. Let's see. We're going to go through a few of these super chat questions, and then we'll go back to the panel to Andrew and Adam quickly, and we'll call it a day. All right, Michael says, would a second Biden term be so terrible? It would probably buy us more time while making the Republican Party better. Why do you think we can make the Republican Party better? What is it about the last 9 years that suggests to you that the Republican Party is open to becoming better and that has any better elements in it? I don't know. And a second Biden term is a disaster. It's already a disaster what he's doing. It's so many ways. People at the FTC, like this woman Khan, is so evil. She's so bad. She is so disastrous, and she's applying things that will have long-term bad consequences. And imagine another 4 years of Khan at the FTC. Just that is a nightmare, not to mention all the other disastrous things that Biden is doing and all the other people that he's putting in powerful places that will have horrific consequences over the long run. But, yeah. Louis Philip, no, liberty advocates pass too many time to react. If we want to win, we must go on the offense and propose to advance our goal, propose an agenda. Yeah, I agree. Go for it. We should all do it. I have an agenda. I keep proposing it. I even did a State of the Union address as if I was president with my agenda for my next 4 to 8 years. So I am all in to proposing agendas. The problem is nobody listens to my agenda. It's useless to propose an agenda that nobody listens to. Michael says, why did Bush try to privatize Social Security and not Reagan? Bush seemed like more of a consistent altruist than Reagan. Bush didn't try to privatize Social Security. God, Bush tried to pseudo-privatize a tiny fraction of Social Security. And he did it because, the people around him convinced him that Social Security was going bankrupt, and that he had an opportunity to create a legacy by saving it. But the whole point was to save Social Security by privatizing a fraction of it. And so George Bush was no saint, and Ronald Reagan was terrible. Now, Ronald Reagan nominated a committee to investigate how to save Social Security. And you know who the head of that committee was? Anybody know who the head of that committee was? Good old buddy of ours, Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan headed that committee. He was an opportunity for an objectivist to say, we should privatize it and ultimately do away with it. And here's some options on how to do it. And here's some ways, and keep, all kinds. He could have, wow, the number of things he could have done, and written an amazing document that, even if it was not taken seriously, would have now been a model for future commissions that looked at Social Security. He would have set a framework. What did Alan Greenspan recommend instead? Raise Social Security taxes and make the retirement age later. And they actually did that. The Reagan administration, that was the Social Security reform. And of course, Alan Greenspan did this because he wanted the job at the Fed. And he couldn't piss the whole world off and then expect to go to the Fed. I don't think he believed it, but that's what he wrote. That's what happens when objectivists people who consider themselves objectivists get into government and sell themselves to the devil. Which is what Greenspan did. Stephen, thank you. Really appreciate the support. Still $260 to go. Okay, 3 more questions, and then we'll get to our panelists. Frank says, I just saw a YAF lecture by Andy Puzder. Yeah, he was the CEO of a food company. I forget which one. The moral case for free market capitalism, but he also defended tariffs and fair trade. That's free trade? No, that's not free market. That's the problem with these guys. He's hugely influenced by Ayn Rand, he says, and yet he comes out for tariffs and fair trade. So, it's better not to have defenders of the moral case for capitalism who don't understand it, who have no conception of it, than just not to have defenders. So, but that's who he is. He used to be a huge Ayn Rand fan. Harper says, what's the difference between being dogmatic and absolute? Dogmatic is anti-reason. Dogmatic is believing in something because that's what the dogma says you should believe. It's believing in something in spite of the evidence, in spite of whether you actually know it or not, because that's what you're supposed to hold. Absolute just means this is the way it is. There's just it's knowing that there is such a thing as certainty. Okay, Justin says, I will support Trump no matter what. I'm loyal. That is the lamest statement ever, and that is authoritarianism. That is fundamentally the epistemology and the nature of authoritarianism. Thank you, Justin, for confirming my bleak view of the current state of America. Americans. Justin just confirmed it. Thank you, Justin. All right, quickly, Adam.
Yes, you've mentioned Carly Fiorina in relatively positive contexts. I consider her one of the most evil people I have ever met in person. She destroyed Bell Labs. She ran the swindle that she invented that essentially forced Lucent Technologies into something very near bankruptcy. And I don't think inventing a new swindle is something meritorious. So how much do you know about her? And do you have any positive reasons for mentioning her favorably?
So I obviously don't know enough about her because I've never associated her with the death of Lucent. I actually just listened to a book that talks about the death of Bell Labs and Lucent, and didn't mention Carly Fiorina. So I'll have to research the connection between Carly Fiorina and Bell Labs and Lucent. But certainly, if she had a hand in that, that would condemn her to a ninth rung of hell, just that by itself. Because Bell Labs and it was spun off into a company called Lucent, was one of the great institutions, American institutions, and it clearly floundered, it clearly lost, and ultimately was sold to the French company, I think.
It was sold to Alcatel, which eventually was sold to the Finnish company Nokia, which eventually became a subsidiary of Microsoft, which is where I get my pension now. So.
But Nokia, only part of Nokia became a subsidiary of Microsoft, not that part, not the Lucent part. The part that became a subsidiary of Microsoft is just the handset, which now doesn't exist.
Okay.
The switching equipment, which is what was important. The telecommunication equipment manufacturing is still at Nokia. Nokia is still the big alternative to the Chinese in terms of them, and Ericsson are the two companies that still represent an alternative to Chinese telecommunication. And
thank you for correcting that. You're right.
So I obviously don't know that much about her. I think she got a bad rap at HP when she ran HP, and went through the consolidation with Compaq. I think that was under her watch. But
I think the consolidation with Compaq was several years before her watch.
Okay, so I'll have to go research. So maybe I shouldn't talk because I don't remember it well enough. But and then I thought at the time she turned out to be a lot worse than I thought she was. There was a period in which I thought she was quite good on capitalism as a presidential candidate, and because she came from California, not that religious. But then it turned out when she ran for the Senate in California that she was super religious, and she made abortion like the anti-abortion position, the number one position of a plaque. And she ran on that, even though that was she couldn't win in California on that. So it was stupid above all else. So my respect for her declined. I mention her because Trump was so brutal towards her, not towards her positions, but just, calling her ugly and just on a childish level was brutal towards her. And so she comes up in that context.
Well, Trump is always childish in the bad sense.
Yes.
In other words, his mental maturity is about the level of a toddler.
Yeah, I think that's true of most people who have low self-esteem, which is, I know people don't believe me, but Trump has very low self-esteem. All right, thank you, Adam. Andrew.
Going back to the Fountainhead, and you brought up the similarities between Dominique and Gail Waynand. They both had a malevolent universe premise, and they seem to have dealt with it differently. Is there a way that they dealt with it differently such that Dominique was able to reclaim herself and Gail was not?
Yeah, I mean, I think primarily it was because Gail's whole purpose in life, i.e. his career, his productive endeavors, were organized around that malevolent universe premise. And when for a little bit he tried to fight that, right, when he's trying to defend Roark in the trial, it just goes against him, and he capitulates. He doesn't have the strength to overcome it. I think for Dagny, it's not as integrated.
At that point, right?
What's that?
He has Tui on the payroll at that point, right?
Well, he has Tui on a payroll way before that, and he's had Tui for a long time, and he's a facilitator of Tui, and part of what I think makes it so difficult for him is he comes to acknowledge the fact that he's facilitated Tui and how evil Tui is. Whereas Dagny, Dominique she's cynical towards Tui. She'd never facilitated Tui. She's like, she wants to destroy Roark, but she's not gonna cooperate with Tui, really. She's like dismissive of Tui. She thinks he's ridiculous. And so she's less integrated.
But she does strategize.
On a local level, but she's not going to employ him. She's not going to hire him. She's not going to, I don't think. And so I think it's less integrated into her being. And, and this is where I think Rand's view of femininity and masculinity comes in. I think Dominique is still on the feminine premise of looking for a hero, looking for somebody to look up to. And so she can overcome a lot of baggage because he can help raise her up to where he is, because she has a relationship of a hero worshiper with Roark. Waynand is not in that position because he can't quite have that relationship with Roark. So that's a more psychological subtle point that I cannot elaborate on. Somebody else would have to do that. But I get a sense that it's right, even though I can't really prove that it's right.
Gotcha.
There's something about a female-male relationship that can never be completely replicated among heterosexuals between two men, in terms of just the way they relate to one another. All right, so we have one more final super chat question. It appears that it's final. We'll see. Make America Great Again supporters strike me as not only mindless, but proudly mindless. I think that's right. They value their devotion above anything else, including facts. Like a medieval priest, someone should write an article on it. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. It's why somebody like Justin can come out and say, I'm loyal. I will support Trump to the end. That is loyalty as a virtue, which Ayn Rand would cringe at, the idea that loyalty is a virtue. This kind of loyalty, this kind of blind loyalty to something, a mindless loyalty. But that's where we are today. We definitely have, and this is authoritarianism. This is the psychology and mentality of a people ready for an authoritarian to come around and rally them around some kind of flag, some kind of cause, some kind of mystical thing that they could get excited about. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate our panelists and the support that they provide on a monthly basis. I really appreciate all the super chatters. Thank you. If you'd like to support the show and become a panelist, you can do so at $25 or more on any one of the platforms, Patreon or yaronbrookshow.com/support primarily. If you would like, or you could just become a monthly donor, whatever level you would like on those platforms. Let's try to, some of you who have never supported the show, who don't do it through the super chat and don't do it on a monthly basis, please become monthly supporters. It really will help us stabilize the show and make it possible for me to bug you less about the super chat. The super chat right now is super, super important in terms of funding this show. If we had more monthly contributors, we would actually I could loosen up on the super chat and not bug you as much, because the money coming in from it would be less important. All right, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow. We're actually going to do a show tomorrow. I don't know what the topic is going to be. I will let you know. But tomorrow, 8 p.m. East Coast time, we will have a show. And then there'll be new shows on Monday and Tuesday. Maybe a show Monday night. We'll see if I can squeeze that in. And then I'm off for like 3.5 weeks, and we'll have to figure out when the shows are between my travel. But we will see you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam.